Hey, Anatomy and Physiology. Today we're going to learn about the structure and function of particular neurons. So go ahead, get out a piece of paper and a pencil and make sure that you take notes along with this. So structure and function of neurons. And then we also have this supporting cell called a neuroglial cell. This should sound a little familiar. We covered it when we looked at the connective tissues and muscle tissues and nervous tissue and epithelial tissue unit. So let's kick things off with the functions. Your central nervous system and peripheral nervous system, they work together to monitor the external and internal environment of your body. Then they process that information. It is mainly the central nervous system that does that processing. Integrates it, decides what to do, and then that message is sent away to the effectors in order to get that mission done. So my best example I can think of is going to La Hacienda, and they give me a plate and it's really hot and they tell me don't touch it. First thing I do is I touch the plate. So the sensors in my hand are going to pick up that information. They're going to send that information to my brain, and then my brain is going to process it, and it's either going to say, oh, that's really hot, or it's not that bad. That information is going to go back, and the effector is either to the motor neurons or to the motor neurons just to chill, because it's either okay and my hand can stay there, or I pull back and have a quick reflex. So this is a neuron down at the bottom, and then you can see all of the neuroglial cells around it. A neuron is going to be, let me say that backwards. Let me say that the other way. I messed up. A nerve is a bundle of neurons. So one neuron is like an individual pen, and then if I have a bundle of pens in my hand, that is going to be the nerve itself. Or like a bouquet of flowers, the individual flower is a neuron, whereas the bouquet itself is a nerve. You need to make sure that you learn those two and that you try to differentiate between the two when speaking. So we have two main divisions. I brought this up earlier. We have the central nervous system, which is around the axial skeleton, which, hey, we know that now. And then the peripheral nervous system, which is going to be around the appendicular skeleton. The axial skeleton is going to be like covering and protecting the central nervous system. We see that a lot with like our skull and then our vertebrae within our spinal cord. And then the peripheral nervous system, those neurons and nerves can get really, really small and fine, which is why we can have so much sensation within like our fingertips. So types of nervous system cells. The first one is a neuron. This is the main type of cell within the nervous system. It is what relays and processes the messages. This is what is going to send the signal, whereas the neuroglial cells, I like to think about them as the neural glue. They provide support to the neurons, they feed, they nourish the neurons. If a neuron is damaged in one way or another, they can fix them. So in this unit, we are going to be going into depth about what is a neuroglial cell. So neuroglial cells, or the neural glue. I got my little Pac-Man. There you go. Just know that this says neuroglial. So we have Pac-Man going up here. Microglial cells, they phagocytize bacteria or cellular debris. So microglial cells remind me a lot of Pac-Man, getting like little, I don't even know what those dots are called, but they walk around or they like float around, and they phagocytize all of the bacteria or cellular debris that is gathering around the neurons. This is massive. This is one of the reasons why people that have Alzheimer's have a difficulty remembering things. It is because those microglial cells don't work as efficiently as they used to. So cellular debris starts to build up within the neurons, and then the neurons are not able to communicate as effectively, which causes a issue with remembering. It causes difficulty processing, and what leads to Alzheimer's, and it's very detrimental and really sad to watch your family members or friends to go through that. Oligodendrocytes, they are going to be the ones that provide this myelin sheath around the central nervous system axon. So I'm just throwing a lot of words out at you. First of all, each neuron kind of looks like an arm. I'll try to get this in the picture. Okay, looks like an arm. We have the dendrites, which are going to be your fingers. The cell body, which is going to be like the palm of your hand, and then the axon, which is going to be the antebrachial area. So the dendrites here are what pick up the information. That information goes through the cell body and then travels down the axon. Now, that axon, this area, is coated in a really fatty substance called the myelin sheath. This is what allows for that signal to move extremely fast from one neuron to another neuron. So the oligodendrocytes are responsible for coating this in a very, very fatty tissue that allows for that signal to jump and to move quickly. Without that myelin sheath there, the signal takes a very long time to travel, and that person is probably going to have some mental disabilities because of that. Astrocytes, they kind of look like stars, but they are what connect the blood vessels to the neurons to help the neurons get a lot of those nutrients that they need. So the astrocyte, we can find it right here. Microglial cell, it's responsible for phagocytizing bacteria and cellular debris. And then oligodendrocytes secrete the myelin sheath in the central nervous system. That's really important because our last little guy is the Schwann cell. Does the same exact thing as the oligodendrocyte, but is found within the peripheral nervous system. And you guys can't see it on the screen because my screencast is cutting it off, but Schwann cells can grow back. This is one of the big differences between the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. I told you a while ago about how one of my college roommates was chopping up sweet potatoes to make sweet potato fries, and when I found her, she was laying over a sink and she was bleeding a ton. Well, she had chopped off the tip of one of her fingers and the flap, which was kind of hanging there. Well, she goes to the doctor, they end up bandaging everything up. If that damage had occurred within her central nervous system, she would never have been able to regain that connection with those nerves. But because it was in her peripheral nervous system and the Schwann cells can grow back, the myelin sheath then coated over some of those neurons, and that is what allowed for her to have some feeling or sensation in her fingertip once again. So Schwann cells, they can grow back. Oligodendrocytes, they cannot. You guys are just going to have to remember that oligodendrocytes are in the central nervous system. They do not grow back, whereas the Schwann cells are in the peripheral nervous system and that they can come back. All right, so we have those four types of neuroglial cells and neural glue cells. I want to see if you guys can find them on here, so go ahead and pause the video. All right, so you should have been able to find all of them. We did not talk about ependymal cells, but those are going to be on the edge. It's very similar to epithelial tissue. The main ones that I want you to focus on are the oligodendrocytes, astrocytes, and the microglial cells. You cannot see the Schwann cells because we are looking at the central nervous system. Okay, so what is the big difference between oligodendrocytes and Schwann cells? Go ahead and pause and think. All right, one of the biggest differences, oligodendrocytes are found in the central nervous system, Schwann cells are found in the peripheral, and Schwann cells can grow back, whereas oligodendrocytes, they cannot. Okay, so now we are looking at a neuron. I already talked about how neuron is very similar to an arm, and yes, my graphics are on point here. Look at that, yes, good. So the message, it starts in the dendrites, the fingertips, and if you think about it, you can feel around and get a lot of that information from your fingertips. You don't feel around with your arm. So your fingertips are receiving the information, the dendrites receive the information. The cell body is what contains all of the cell organelles, including the ribosomes and everything else. And then the axon is what carries the messages away from the body. Notice the myelin sheath, which is the red portion here, moving over in kind of segments the axon. So some cell structures that we need to know. We have a really large nucleus along with a really easily seen nucleolus. Another inception type thing going on here where we have a dream within a dream. We have a nucleus within a nucleus, which is nucleolus. Chromatophilic substances. This is going to be really similar to the rough endoplasmic reticulum with all of the ribosomes on it. It's scattered throughout the cytoplasm, it's membranous, but we're really trying to maintain the proteins in order to keep the neuron firing. And then neurofibrils, these just help the cells keep its shape because structure determines function. So the cell body contains all the organelles. The dendrites are what pick up the information, and then the axons carry it away. You can think about the A's with away. I also like to think about reverse alphabetical order. It starts out with D, CB, A. Dendrites, cell body, axon. So that message, it starts at the end and it moves all the way through. So dendrites, cell body, axon. Yay, PowerPoint graphics. Okay, DCBA. So once again, we start out with the arm, and the fingers are what pick up the information. It goes into the cell body, and then it goes all the way back. So DCBA. All right, so you may not be able to see it. It says axons here. Axons are either myelinated or unmyelinated. Myelin refers to that fat around the axon. So if we have fat around the axon, I forgot that I put those in there. So we have a really, really skinny Photoshop Mariah Carey and then a really chunky baby. So that's what we're going to be looking at here. In the peripheral nervous systems, the Schwann cells form the myelin sheath, all of that fat around the axon. And these little breaks, which we see here, those are called the nodes of Ranvier. It's French, Ranvier. So the nodes of Ranvier, small breaks there. Within the central nervous system, it is the oligodendrocytes that end up producing the myelin. The myelinated neurons within your brain form something called the white matter. The unmyelinated neurons form the gray matter. So if you think about what color fat is, it's either going to be yellow or white. This is how we get that color within the brain. So I'm going to move this over here. Your brain on the inside has the white matter, and this is where a majority of the axons are found. On the outside, we have a lot of the gray matter, and this is where a lot of our dendrites are connecting. So the white matter is going to be excellent for like transmitting that signal, whereas like the dendrites are going to be really, really important for that like short communication, the processing. So what we end up seeing within our brain is it's not how big your brain is, but how much gray matter, how many wrinkles you have in your brain that is going to make you smarter. So, node of Ranvier, myelination, that fat, which is going to help the signal jump, and we're going to talk about that later on, about how that signal is able to jump. The dendrites, which are what collect the message, the cell body, which is what does like a lot of the processing there, and then it travels down the axon. So, once again, difference between oligodendrocyte and Schwann cells? Good job. I hope you got that right because we've already asked this before. Oligodendrocytes found in the central nervous system, Schwann cells in the peripheral, Schwann cells grow back, oligodendrocytes do not. All right, so then structural, that's a structural classification of neurons there. We either have multipolar, which means that we have many branched dendrites around the cell body, one axon. We find a lot of these in the central nervous system. Bipolar, so this is when we have like one arm, the cell body is in the middle, and then the dendrocytes just kind of like stick up off the top. So we only have 2 points. Bi means 2. So bipolar, we only have 2 processes off of the cell body. And this is going to be found with a lot of like special sense organs like your eye, olfactory, and hearing. And then unicellular, we just have like one cell and then it branches off and then we have like 2 portions here. So this is going to be found within the peripheral nervous system. Why do you think? And I'll back up that way you guys can see it. See, one cell body, one process, and then like the axon is like this whole massive thing. So why do you think? Go ahead and pause. All right, so one of the reasons why we have unipolar within the peripheral nervous system is so that that signal can transfer so much faster. It gets to bypass the whole like cell body. So it starts down here and then boom, it just goes. All right, this is part 1. I need you to go ahead and watch part 2 to finish up this lecture.